pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okay, hello. Welcome back to the carousel. I am Isaac, aka Disgraced Propagandist. I have with me today Wokal Distance, aka Michael Young, who is a cultural researcher at a place called the Center for Renewing America, and I like the tagline, for God, for country, for community. And cultural researcher, he is like a guy, great, huge Twitter account. He's appeared on Michael Knowles. That's where I saw him on Michael Knowles from a few years ago talking about Baudrillard. And you're kind of on the Rufo beat, really digging into cultural institutions, woke rot, how these things get all flipped around and screwed up. And you are extremely well read. You have millions of books that you're always talking about. And what we want to talk about today is something that you raised, which is of great interest to me, which is sort of the cycle of counterculture and how it is commodified by the regime, you may say, or the institutions, and what we can do about that. Is it all futile? Is there such thing as counterculture? Does any of this matter? So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. What I'm going to try and do here is, you're no doubt familiar, if you've been in the space for a while, with Helen Pluckrose, James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, Colin Wright, who's the other guy? There's a bunch of people. Richard Hanania, Chris Rufo, Yasha Monk, John McWhorter. Lots of people have been writing about the, what would you call it? The roots of wokeness. Eric Kaufman has a book. There's all these books that have been coming out, right?
Yes.
And most of them focus on different elements of how this arrived. So on the one hand, you'll have somebody like Richard Hanania who says this is civil rights law.
Yes.
It's all built around that.
Yep.
You'll have James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose's book, Cynical Theories, which traces the history of ideas through the academy. You have Christopher Rufo's book, which sort of is a hybrid and takes of a genealogy, an academic genealogy, and a sort of history of the heroes of the movement in terms of their radical activists. So that would be people like the Black Panthers, Angela Davis, and so forth.
I did read Rufo's book, yes. March Through Institutions, San Francisco,
Yeah. I am mentioned in the acknowledgments at the end because I helped him do the research for that book. He would have me research, and when he needed to know things like, okay, did this person write any literature about this, or how did so-and-so get hired over here, or what it was. So I helped him with the research for that book and to find and to locate sources so that he could make his case, which he did really effectively, I thought. So what I want to do is, I think all of these touch on very important aspects of what's going on. But I do think there's been an ingredient that's missing if you step back. So I'd like to talk about that. So I'm going to uncork a new theory here. I talked about this a little bit on Paul Vanderklay's channel, and I was thinking through it in a Christian context when I did that. So I was specifically looking at a iteration of counterculture that had showed up in Christian circles in the 2000s called the emergent church. And unless you are a Protestant Christian of a certain age who has done a lot of reading, you're going to get lost in that discussion. The version of counterculture that most Americans are familiar with is a lot closer to things like the hippies, the punk rock movement, grunge in the early 90s.
Yep.
That's the stuff people are really familiar with. So, my contention is going to be two things. Okay? I'm going to argue that the theory of counterculture, which essentially says that society runs on conformity, that society requires sameness to operate, society requires everybody to be a cog in the machine in order to work, and therefore society functions and continues to function through the repression of the individual and the stifling of creativity and the pressure on people to conform, the requirement to conform, and that the way to fight back against this is to engage in a sort of cultural rebellion. So the way to fight back against the stultifying conformity and the repression of individuality and the stifling of creativity is to engage in those exact activities, to express your individualism, to engage in sort of creative expressions of anti-conformist politics and the like.
Yep.
Okay? You can see this in the hippies, right? Make love, not war. We're engaging in all sorts of artistic expression, and all of this is thought to have deep political implications. Further to that, there's a secondary idea, or an idea which sort of follows. I don't know if it's secondary in importance, but that society at large, particularly mass culture and mass communication, essentially operate as a sort of system of ideological brainwashing. You could think of it that way.
Sure.
Or a system of mind control in which the NPCs of society, regular people, are bamboozled, brainwashed, socially conditioned, or otherwise induced into accepting the legitimacy of the system and to accepting the ideology of the system as though it were legitimate. And this process is used to get people to go along with all of the conformity. Okay? In the 60s, this was generally thought to occur. In the 60s, this was generally thought to be a product of mass communication and particularly advertising. So the advertisers get people, control the desires of people by getting everyone to buy the latest thing. So everyone's now going to buy a blue car, and then everyone's going to buy a red car, and then everyone's going to buy a green car. And this advertising creates in people desires that they don't really have and don't really need, but the advertising needs to do that in order to get people to buy things so that the capitalist system keeps churning. So people are inundated with advertisements that create false desires within them in order to get the system to continue to function appropriately. Or at least that's the theory. Okay? So, in this book, The Rebel Cell, by Joseph Potter and Andrew Heath, which I've been calling the skeleton key of our culture, describes the phenomenon this way. Society, so this is the counterculture view, or one way to state the counterculture view. Society has become thoroughly permeated with propaganda and lies, largely as a consequence of advertising, that the culture as a whole has become an enormous system of ideology, all designed to reproduce faith in the system. The goal of culture jammers, that's a form of countercultural rebellion, is quite literally to jam the culture by subverting the messages used to reproduce this faith in the system and blocking the channels through which it is propagated. Okay? Now, another way to say it is the world we live in is not real. Consumer capitalism has taken every single human experience, transformed it into a commodity, and sold it back to us through advertising and mass media. Every part of human life has been drawn into the spectacle, which is nothing but a system of symbols and representations governed by its own internal logic. So you can see what they're arguing here, right? That the entire culture of mass media is inundating us with advertising and propaganda, which we're saturated in, and because of that, We accept a whole pile of views and ideas. It shapes our desires. It makes us into a conformist cogs in a machine. It makes our desires conform so that we're all, the same. We have the same ideas. We have the same views. We have the same beliefs. We have the same desires. We have the same goals. And that's how capitalism runs on this view. And so the price that we pay for all of the wealth of capitalism is that we have to have our creativity stifled, our freedom crushed, our individuality suppressed, and we all have to become conformist. And you can kind of see this in some of the art from the 60s and 70s, like Pink Floyd's The Wall, where the school is envisioned as a sort of cookie cutter assembly line, stamping out kids that are all being pushed into the meat grinder.
Yeah.
That
Indoctrination, not education.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, but we already, this is, I don't think what you're saying is like super controversial, right? Everybody basically agrees with what you're saying right now. I don't think anybody's like, wow, yeah, I'm being, the TV's even the most normie will admit that obviously, yes, the TV is trying to get me to have certain values. It's trying to get me to consume, et cetera. So where does the part come in where we're understanding this commodification of counterculture? Where does that come in?
So, I'm actually going to argue something else. Order is achieved at the expense of promoting widespread unhappiness, alienation, and neurosis. The solution must therefore lie in reclaiming our capacity for spontaneous pleasure through polymorphous perversity, performance art, modern primitivism, mind-bending drugs, or whatever else turns your crank. In the countercultural analysis, having fun comes to be seen as the ultimate subversive act, hedonism transformed into revolutionary doctrine. So here's what I'm going to argue. That story gets told everywhere. The hippies believed it in the 60s.
Okay. I see where you're going.
You see this coming up in the radicals in the 70s. You see this in the punks in the 80s. You see it in grunge in the 90s.
Grunge, they weren't particularly fun, right? They weren't having fun. They were depressed and sad.
That's true. The cultural critique and the anti-consumerism is still there, right?
Sure, yeah, right.
It's still Kurt Cobain on the cover of Rolling Stone wearing a t-shirt that says corporate magazines still suck.
Yes, yeah.
It's that same countercultural analysis. And what I'm suggesting is that view is the founding narrative of the way our culture functions. Everyone believes it. Like you said, everyone believes some version of this.
Yeah, yes.
Everyone believes that the masses are being brainwashed through mass media and mass communication. Everyone believes that people need to wake up. Everyone believes this. And the problem is everyone believes that the masses are brainwashed, but no one believes that they're part of the masses.
Exactly, yeah. So it's kind of like the architect scene in The Matrix. Remember the architect scene where it's like, or the scene in Under the Silver Lake where it's the guy on the piano saying, have you seen that scene, the piano scene in Under the Silver Lake, where it's the guy saying, every song that you have ever loved was made on a piano by me. It's, I've been in control of the rebellion the entire time. You're saying that the cultural rebellion it's almost like a discharge valve in the entire system that just makes people think that they're rebelling, but really they're just engaging in the practice that they're sort of meant to engage with. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Sort of. Not really.
Okay. So what are you saying?
So follow along here.
Okay.
That scene in The Matrix is actually exactly, The Matrix is an exact representation of the countercultural idea. That everyone is asleep, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that we're all in the Matrix and you have to break out. What I'm saying is that the whole idea is misconceived. My view is that there actually is no widespread system of brainwashing.
Okay, yeah, I got you.
I don't think that it's actually possible to brainwash people on that wide a scale. So in order to understand this, let's take a step back and figure out where all this came from so you can see where I think the mistake is going. You've heard of the Frankfurt School, right?
Yeah.
obviously you've heard of the Frankfurt School. Okay.
I've heard of it. To be perfectly honest, when people say the Frankfurt School, I don't really understand what they're talking about. Besides, it's some sort of like ultra lefty kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the idea. So after Hitler showed up, the Frankfurt School was a group of leftist academics working in the humanities that tried to figure out why Hitler showed up. Okay. They came up with the idea of critical theory, which is instead of trying to understand the way the world is, what you try to do is merge or marry a certain set of values to your understanding of reality. So they were theorizing about how to change the world. According to a leftist paradigm. They did a whole pile of theorizing in the humanities, and they did a whole pile of theorizing in particular the marriage of Marx with Freud is what they're famous for. So they hitched the sort of Marxist revolutionary program. They abstracted out what they could after the failure of Marxism and married it to cultural analysis using Freud as the missing link. Okay, because Freud helps you understand the psychology. Once you have a theory of psychology, you can understand how people will relate to the mass culture as a whole, right? Okay. Something I think people forget is after World War II was brutal. And I think we sometimes forget how brutal it is, because when we think of war today, we think of like Nintendo pilots, right? Flying, or drone warfare. World War II was a lot of trench digging and people charging up hills and bombers that didn't have precision guided bombs, so you had bombs hitting cities in random places. And it culminated in dropping a couple of nukes on 2 cities in Japan. Absolute brutal. So when people came home, they just wanted calm. And so in the 50s, what you had was a society that was over-organized. Everybody just wanted to have a nice, quiet, simple life. And that's understandable. A lot of that was needed because a lot of men came back with post-traumatic stress disorder. They couldn't handle the disorganized world.
Yeah.
During that time as well, the advent of mass manufacturing and the assembly line was really getting going. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So when the Frankfurt School went back and looked at how Hitler showed up, they believed that fascism was the end point of capitalism. That capitalism, its end stage is fascism. Okay? Remember, Germany came out of the Weimar Republic where the center collapsed completely, and it was communists on one side and fascists on the other.
Yeah.
And the Frankfurt School, coming out of that Marxist side of things, said the alternative to a Marxism or a socialism or something like that is fascism. There is no middle ground. There are no other options. Everything will either go to here or go to here. Right?
Right.
It's going to go fascism, Marxist, communism, socialism. That's it. So, when they looked out at the world in the 50s and did their analysis of the culture, they said, well, how do you get wealth? Well, it's mass production. You produce all the same cars. Or you mass produce homes by making all the homes the same. And you mass produce clothes by making all the clothes the same. Right?
Yep.
Everyone holds the same religion. Everyone speaks the same language. All of the neighborhoods are designed the same. And then they begin to look at the organizations and say, well, men show up in gray flannel suits in identical offices doing identical jobs. All the values and mores are the same. And you can begin to see how they begin to think that capitalism runs on conformity. Right?
I'm starting to see why they chose the rainbow, later, because they're trying to break the single color. But it's perfectly ironic because actually they're the gray color. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah, you're seeing exactly that, and we're going to get to that. You're foreshadowing. You're seeing ahead of where we're going.
Okay, good.
So they begin to come up with this idea that everything is about conformity.
Yeah.
And While that is going on, there's this movement away from the economic Marxism that says control the means of production to a cultural sort of Marxism where the object of analysis is the culture. So when they're examining the culture, they begin to look at the culture and say it's a culture of conformity that allows capitalism to run. It's alienation stops being that man is alienated from his labor for economic reasons, and alienation starts to get cashed out in psychological or cultural or social reasons. The result of that is, to make a very long story very short so I don't bore your audience, the counterculture theorists in the 50s and 60s begin to come to the conclusion that capitalism ends in fascism and capitalism runs on conformity. And if you want to stop capitalism from turning into fascism, you short circuit capitalism by attacking the conformity. That's what you do.
Yeah, love it. This makes a lot of sense, and that this is why USAID is funding trans stuff and wherever, right? Because it's intentional destabilizing from the uniformity of capitalism, which I think was something that has sort of been intuited by many people. But you're saying this is literally like an intentional thing that started with the Frankfurt School. It was engineered to sort of end up that way.
Yes. There's a beautiful line. They're very intentional, and the reason that they're so intentional is that the reason that they're so intentional about this is that they genuinely believe that if you disrupt the conformity, you will disrupt capitalism. They genuinely believe that. And the result is, there's a beautiful line here. I just want to pull it out because it's just so good.
Is their end game communism? Is that what they want to bring about?
Well, see, the thing is that they're cagey about that.
Yeah.
They tend not to tell us what exactly it is they're trying to do. Because in telling us exactly what it is they're trying to do, what they end up doing is locking themselves into something that we can test.
Yeah, which they don't want.
Tell us what they're trying to do. Real communism has never been tried.
Yeah, well, and it seems like their only goal is really preventing fascism, right? It's like they don't actually have an idea of what else would be good.
Their
it's just like
program is intentionally vague because then you can never debunk it. How are
Right.
you going to debunk it if they don't come out and say exactly what it is that they're after?
Yeah, what they're like actually looking to bring about, right?
Right. Oh man. It's so. Oh, here it is. So this is the result of the conformity, of the counterculture anti-conformity. First, there's a habit of treating all rules as repressive, right? Every rule is seen as an attempt to stamp you down, make you a cog in the machine, and repress your creativity. Second, there's a naive faith in the powers of spontaneous harmony. We don't need any rules. Everyone can just do whatever they want and it'll all work out. And then finally, there's the senseless privileging of that which is irregular and unpredictable over that which is regular and predictable. And that's where you're seeing the trans stuff, right? Anything which is weird that is outside the norm is good, because anybody who's engaged in the norm is engaging in conformity. So the goal is just to be different for its own sake. Because then you're bucking the system and rebelling. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, so first off, let's just punch a hole in that. Okay, let's punch a hole in that. When you think of capitalism, what does capitalism actually run on? Is it conformity? Is it having is it advertisers brainwashing us to buy the blue thing and then buy the red thing and then buy the green thing?
No, it's really about being different in a way, right? I mean, it's like it's, right?
Yes. Every single product is trying to sell itself as different.
Yeah.
That's how.
Well, this is what I do. I run a branding agency, so this is what I literally do all the time. Is find the key differentiator of things.
Yes, that you will love the next section and you will get it.
Okay.
What are the things that people actually like to buy? Is it innovation, creativity, or is it conformity and sameness?
I mean, yeah. Well, that's a little bit of a different question because again, those are both options. You could tailor a brand around anything, around any idea. But yeah, the idea from a branding perspective is to create uniqueness. There's a whole practice now you'd be interested to know called category creation. This is something that people in Silicon Valley have a huge boner for. And the whole idea is don't start a product, launch a category. Don't be another blank, be the first blank. So people will have some, stupid SaaS company and it'll be like, we're not a business SaaS company. We're the first individual operating system. And it's like, but you're right. In a fundamental sense, you're right. All I'm saying is, one of my favorite campaigns ever was this Normcore Gap campaign, which was dress normal. So that was in a way differentiating by being conformist, right? So it's like there's kind of an endless dichotomy between where you want to be in the individualism kind of brand quality. But anyway, keep going.
That is absolutely perfect. In Thomas Frank's The Conquest of Cool, he says, when articles decrying conformity had finally appeared in no less an August periodical than Reader's Digest, Daniel Bell wrote that no one in the United States defends conformity. Everyone is against it, and probably everyone always was. 35 years ago, you could rattle any middle-class American by charging him with being a Babbitt. Today, you could do so by accusing him of conformity.
By charging with being a what? A Babbitt? What was it?
Yeah, that's just an old school insult. And what he's saying is like the new insult, like if you really want to call somebody, like instead of calling
Say you're a conformist. You're square. You're a square. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what actually, like in capitalism, what actually brings new products and economic expansion? It's creativity, innovation, doing new things, being disruptive. Every single major corporation that they point to as an example of conformity started out as a disruptor. The Gap, you gave, that's such a beautiful example because, dude, you're in advertising, you're so good at this. This book mentions the Gap very specifically as a company that started out by being a disruptor. They mention that specifically and talk about those campaigns in that book.
Right.
Same with The Conquest of Cool. It's you're bang on. That's exactly it. And so it actually, rebellion and going against the grain and doing your own thing, that's the lifeblood of capitalism. It's not conformity. And so the fundamental diagnosis of the counterculture starts out wrong. Okay? So in Thomas Frank's The Conquest of Cool, he mentions this. How does he put it?
Can I ask you a question, actually? Can I ask a question about this?
Yes, absolutely.
Why is it that they think that conformity is the end place of capitalism? Is it an economic argument in the sense that by sort of unifying everything, the profit is the highest? Is that why? Do they say why capitalism inevitably ends in conformity?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a few reasons. The first is that the assembly line nature of production requires uniformity of standards.
Right,
That would be one pressure. They would say there's a number of pressures. The second one would be the problem of overproduction. If you produce too many goods that people don't want, you have to get everybody to want that good. So you have to have a coming together of an amalgamation of people's tastes into a single thing. A bringing together so that things are uniform, a uniformity of taste. And you get that through advertising, which say, this is the hot thing, you don't want to be left out. Then they would say that once you have those things, the ideology of the people, in order to make that system grow, that has to what would the word? Coalesce around a certain particular ideology, so that what you're having is things are all of these insights are kind of congealing in the same way, right? So On the one hand, you have the assembly line, which is stamping out identical goods. And then in order to get people to buy those, you have to have identical desires. Then you see trends where people are tending to buy the same thing and they're coming together in that way. And then you say, well, people have to agree on an ideology. So you see all of this coming together and they look at that and say, sameness, uniformity, the stamping out of difference. That's where capitalism is headed.
Yeah, I get it. Totally. Okay. I mean, I think they're not entirely wrong about that. I mean, they're not, I think from a branding perspective and from a marketing perspective and just from a supply and demand perspective, uniqueness is prized. But on the producer side, they are kind of right that what the producer wants is uniformity. They just want to make the substrate as uniform as possible, and then the painting on top of it as unique as possible, so that people will keep buying it, right? I mean, it's like that's kind of what but on their end, they want to maximize efficiency. And if everything is just a cog, and totally interchangeable, fungible cog, that's the maximum efficiency. Right?
Yes. And so the idea then is that you can see then how they would look at that underlying and say, aha, like deep in the heart of capitalism, it's that conformity.
Yeah.
But I would liken it a little bit to houses. Once our manufacturing techniques with houses improved, I mean, if you look at houses from the 60s, they're basically all the same. And the houses from the 50s. And the same is true with clothing from the 50s and cars from the 50s, right? It's all the same. The office buildings all look the same. And, I mean, comedians of the era used to have a heyday with that. They talk about men in identical suits, working at identical jobs with identical typewriters who would drive home in identical cars to identical houses in identical neighborhoods with identical looking wives. And then joke about the man who would get up, drive home in the wrong car to the wrong house, make love to the wrong wife, and not notice because everything is the same. Right? I mean, the jokes kind of write themselves.
Funny. Yeah.
But as we get more sophisticated manufacturing techniques, as innovation kicks in, you get more designs and more choices and more possibilities. So, for example, if you wanted to get a house back in the 90s, you could choose from 2 or 3 floor plans. And then you'd have maybe 20 or 30 carpeting options. And then you'd have maybe 20 or 30 linoleum options, maybe 10 different. And you'd wind up with 400 or 500 different options for housing. Right? My parents did this back in the 90s. In the 60s, you'd have one. Today, if you want to have a house built with the same sort of assembly line structure, like the binder of choices is like this thick. It's thousands of combinations because the manufacturing techniques have improved. And so it's no longer the case that assembly line production requires that uniformity. It's what you're talking about is the efficiency piece, right? CNC machines now mean that we don't need to have, sort of buzzsaws going, making the same cuts, producing the same size wood, so we all get the same size cabinets. Now cabinets can be custom out with a CNC machine like same day. And it's not much more expensive, especially if you're doing it at high volume. So that's Kitchencraft that does that, right? So we can now have high degrees of customization. Not only that, but all of these industries are disrupted through people who engaged in creativity and innovation. So it's the big driver of capitalism isn't conformity. The big driver of capitalism is innovation and creativity. What they made a mistake of thinking is the thing that you pointed out. You said they want to optimize efficiency, right? Sameness and simplification were a product of its early attempts to optimize efficiency, which technology is beginning to obviate to a large degree.
Yeah, no, I got you. I totally get you. Yeah, and agree. And I agree. I'm just saying, like, I can understand why they got to that conclusion. But yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and Packard in The Hidden Persuaders was a very important book in the 60s. Yeah. And it talked about the ad men and the advertisers, which were inducing people to have particular desires. Now, You're in branding, so you're gonna like this. Thomas Frank talks about this in The Conquest of Cool, that in the 50s and 60s, at least in the early 60s, advertisements of the era would be a man in a white coat saying, "Our product has 9, I don't know what you call them, 9 points of interest which make our product better." Or there are 14 nutrients in our bread which are good for your health. And they'd have a scientific guy standing there pointing at a pie chart. Or if you look at ads from the 50s and 60s, they always have the same kind of camera angles and the same kind of lighting and the same aesthetic. And the copy is always a very regimented, laid out case for this is why our product is better. And it became extraordinarily predictable. All the ads looked the same. It's part of that conformity piece, right? So when the Hidden Persuaders came out and attacked all of this and talked about the crisis in overproduction, which required the use of advertising to direct people's desires so that all of the products get, lots of the products get purchased and everything else like that. That book, you know who loved that book? That attack on the conformity? Advertisers. The people in advertising wanted to be creative and do new ads.
Yeah.
And they couldn't because the over-organized organizational culture of the 50s prevented that. The post-war culture of the 50s presented that. So that book, The Hidden Persuaders, was hugely influential. So in the business class, particularly in the business class in fashion, in automotive, in all of the artistic spaces, they hated the stultifying conformity of the 50s. They understood where it came from, but they hated it. They accepted the critique of mass society full stop. And so what did they want to do with their advertisements? They wanted to subvert the culture of conformity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what did people absolutely love?
Yeah, they loved.
Subversion. They loved those
Right.
subversions. Do you know anything about the Volkswagen ads from the 60s?
Yeah, of course. I know all about it. That's called the Creative Revolution. It's the lemon. Lemon is the first one. We talk about this all the time. But it's kind of funny what you're saying, if I'm understanding you, because it's like you're almost saying that the capitalists loved this communist critique so much and then used it to get really good at capitalism.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
exactly what happened.
All right. So that's pretty funny.
They took the communist critique and said, yes, everything but the getting rid of private property. But we don't
Yeah, right. None of that stuff.
cultural critique.
Right.
The
Yeah.
cultural critique they were on board with. They didn't think capitalism, the end state of capitalism, with fascism. They didn't buy
Yeah.
that part. But they bought the entire critique of mass society.
Yeah. Okay.
All of it. And so Thomas Frank talked about how he went into one of the archives of one of these advertising companies, and he did interviews with all of these people. And so he would read through their archives and could try and figure out like what they were thinking. And one of the guys who was there told him that the way you sell something to America is you find some social convention, figure out a way in which it kind of prevents people from doing something, and then sell your product as a subversion of that
Yeah.
social convention, right? So
Yeah.
that's why you see all these guys like breaking off of the suits, right?
Yeah.
You see,
Mm-hmm.
people
Yeah.
flinging off the shackles of society. Like that's like a trope in advertising
Yeah,
now. But at the
yeah.
time, it was brand new. That lemon ad you were talking about, Tom Frank talks about that in his book too. It also makes an appearance in Mad Men.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge deal. Because what's Volkswagen doing? They're subverting the trope of advertising, right? They're winking and nodding to like everyone knows we're just trying to sell stuff here. We're not unbiased scientists. You all know that. Avis ran
Yeah, they were the second best, which was that's a big one. Yeah, no, and there was like, we're better because we're second best. It's like, we have to try harder because we're second best. Yeah, that's a great ad in history around the same time.
Revolution. Pepsi
Yeah.
Revolution is another one. You know the Coke ad?
Which
The Coke?
yeah, of course, which is what Mad Men ends with. Yeah, definitely.
And the scene in the end of Mad Men, what's he doing?
Yeah, he's commodifying this
Wait.
this thing,
He's sitting there like this.
meditating. Yeah.
Once he frees his mind and fully accepts that he doesn't need to maintain any of the 50 tropes, like he's the man in the gray flannel suit, right? Once he frees himself from the shackles of mass society, he's then able to make the perfect ad for Coca-Cola.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Because it's exactly that point. So that critique of mass society, everyone accepts, and it's wrong. Everyone thinks that society is running on conformity, and everyone thinks that the way out of it is to rebel. And I'm here to tell you that society does not run on conformity. American society thrives on innovation and creativity.
Okay. So, and I think you're completely right. The question, though, is at the core of what you're saying, there is a contradiction. Because at the core of what you're saying is, you're saying the establishment is anti-establishmentism.
Yeah.
So we've been living with that core contradiction for so long, for 60 years, basically. And so I feel like, aren't we kind of getting to the end of that now? Like, it seems like now that has run.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly what you're saying. Because there's nothing else to rebel against, right? Once you say men and women, men can become women.
If there's anything, that's the end of the road.
Children can be drag queens. What's left? Where do you go?
Yeah.
There's almost no taboo. I mean, there's something like murder. That's still a taboo. Like beating up people for fun is another one. Certain acts that are related to drag queens in schools, like that taboo is being broken too. But like it was there for a while. Transing kids is also like it was there, but that's breaking down.
Well, they're trying to break it.
Pushback. Yeah,
but the taboo is being a conformist, right? That's the taboo.
Right, because everything conforming to the norms of society is considered to be evil. You have to break every norm, all of them.
Right.
And so what you're seeing is everybody's always just endlessly tearing down pieces of society, and now society is beginning to fall apart. But you can't build anything because the fundamental narrative says that mass culture needs to be torn down.
Right. Yeah.
And you can see it. You can see it in everything.
Right. So what's the role now of the counterculture? Now that it's been revealed that it's just the same process over and over and over again of a new form of rebellion comes up. The one I actually think about the most is gangster, or not even rap, just rap music, gangster rap. But, and what America is so good at is selling this thing, across the globe. Because we love it. Because you're right, human beings love the broken shackles, right? They love it. And they can't get enough of buying the broken shackles. But now we've been breaking the shackles for, 60 years. And things are breaking down, as you're saying, obviously. And now it's becoming cool to be fascist in a way, or at least conformist maybe in a way. So what happens now? Does this, it sounds like you're saying that it's actually quite hopeful that human beings have this state of constantly wanting to be colorful. But now that state has gotten us into such trouble. What do we say now about the counterculture becoming conformist?
Well, there is. So I love that you're in branding. Had I would have been. I was already excited about this, but I absolutely love this because this whole thing kicks off with the critique of advertising, and all about the creative revolution that was going on inside the advertising agencies mirrored the counterculture exactly. These people had, the only difference was that the creative people in the businesses saw capitalism as a way of increasing creativity, right? Freedom. They didn't like the idea of a centrally planned economy because they thought that the centrally planned economy, of aka the Soviets, required conformity.
Well, yeah, when they were far more right, they were far more correct to think that.
That's right. So
Yeah.
I mean, you're bang on. And it's become cliche. I don't know that the counterculture has become conformist,
Yeah.
but it is conforming to a cliche, if that makes sense. Right? So if you think about it like this, it's always, you know how the Matrix, in the movie The Matrix, they say like, this is the 6th time we have done this, right?
Yes, yeah. This is the architect scene, right? It's like it's the same loop again. Yeah.
Right. So the hippies, that's a loop. And then
Yeah.
you have the 70s radicals, that's a loop. Then you have the 80s punks, and that's a loop. Then you have grunge, and that's a loop. Then you have the gangster rap, and that's a loop. We're running out of loops. There's just, you just can't keep doing this forever because it's always the same archetype and it always falls apart for the same reasons.
Yeah.
There's also another element here, which is they point out that here's another book. This is No Logo.
Oh yeah, I have this. Yeah, Naomi Klein.
Yeah. And you'll notice in the start of the book, she talks about I squint tilt my head and all I can see out the window is 1932 straight down to the Lake Brown warehouses, oatmeals, colored smokestacks painted on brick walls, advertising long discounted brands. This is the old industrial Toronto of the garment factories, furriers, and wholesale wedding dresses, right? I wrote this book while living in Toronto's ghost of a garment district in a 10-story warehouse. Okay? She describes the rest of the building is rented out to yoga instructors, documentary film producers, graphic designers, and writers and artists with live-work spaces.
Yeah.
We're all stuck together here now, caught in the harsh realities of economic globalization and the all-enduring rock video aesthetic. That's what she says. She's describing her house. She talks about how the famed union organizer, I think it was Emma Goldsmith, used to live in her block, right? She goes on about this in great depth. What's really interesting is that if you have an understanding for how social class works in Canada, thank goodness Emma Goldman, the famed anarchist and labor organizer who lived on this street in the 30s, wasn't around to witness the transformation. If you actually understand how social class in Canada works and how real estate in Canada works, when this book was written, she was living in a genuine factory loft in the King Spadina area of Toronto. That might have been one of the single most cool and desirable pieces of real estate in all of Canada. The reason why it has a rock video aesthetic is because that's where rock videos were being shot in Canada in the 90s. That was probably one of the coolest places you could have lived. Okay? Being different from the mass society, having something that the rest of the people can't get, is a source of social distinction. And one of the things that's true of the Frankfurt School, it was really, really elitist. They hated everything that was mainstream. They thought it was vulgar and gauche, and they thought they themselves were distinguished. Like Theodore Adorno does these rants against jazz and rock and roll in favor of 12-tone music. It's very elitist, like extraordinarily so. And so there's a sense in which a lot of this countercultural rebellion is in some ways fighting over a positional good. If everybody's different, then nobody is.
Yeah.
So you've got to push people, have to have a mainstream in order to rebel against.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when the culture fragments enough where everyone's a rebel, then what is it rebelling against?
Exactly.
Nobody's a rebel at that point.
And that's where we are now. So, but what I'm trying to get you to talk about now is particularly with regard to the right ascendants. God, I hate the ascendants. Ascendants to what? But now that there's this at
just-
least potential, what happens now? Where do you see things going, particularly for the dissident right, the cultural right? How do you see us capturing this opportunity, or not? Or is it an opportunity? Like, what do you think about right now?
You nailed the question with the ascendance thing. Ascending to what? That's
Yeah.
exactly the question to have asked. Did you ever watch the movie School of Rock?
Yeah. Yep.
You remember the scene where Jack Black is talking about, let me tell you about the man. It's like the man.
Vaguely, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
He talks about how he's teaching them rock and roll. He says, we're always rebelling against the man because the man wants to get you down. The man wants to stop you from doing this. The man.
Yeah.
It's the man. As soon as you ascend, as soon as you get to the top, you become the man.
Yeah.
And then everyone rebels against you. Part of the reason woke happened, or woke is being rebelled against so hard right now, is it became the man.
Yeah.
It became totally controlling.
Yeah.
Absolutely controlling. Stultifying, in fact. And so now everyone's kind of going like, I don't want to be that. I hate that. Everyone's rebelling against that now. Woke, when it started out, was an extreme source of social distinction. Look, I have all of these terms I know. I can talk about this system of white supremacist heteronormativity, which is
Right.
causing blah, 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 blah. And there's all of this jargon about post-colonial theory, and there's structural forces which are socially conditioning people to internalize misogyny, using an oppressive gender binary, right? And all of this, and it's a source of distinction. But when everyone talks like that, now you've eroded your distinction. You're no longer special. You're now one of the masses, so you have to break out. And the problem that the right is facing is, as it's coming up, it doesn't face that critique. But once it comes into power, now it's the man.
Yeah.
It becomes the man. It becomes the thing to be rebelled against. So what is the right going to do?
Yeah.
And what I would like to see the right be able to do is break that fundamental narrative. I want to break the counterculture narrative. I think the right needs to do that. I think the right needs to break the idea that just because something becomes accepted on a mass level, just because something becomes ascendant in society, doesn't mean it's bad. And it doesn't make it conformist. Right? If everybody agrees on something and the thing they agree on is true, that's not conformity. That's everybody being correct. Right? Mm-hmm. Rebelling against the truth is a bad idea. So people getting along or having a common language is not bad. Diversity for its own sake is not a good.
Yeah.
Being different doesn't make you right. Sometimes being different just means you didn't understand what everybody else understood.
But yeah, of course that's true. But what do you? The problem with that is people's insatiable desire, as we're saying. We're facing the same problem. We're facing the same contradiction, which is people's insatiable desire as buyers of things to be different. So, like, how do you do it? Like, this is what so many people, all the time, I'm hearing about right-wing art, right-wing art, right-wing art. Give me the right-wing art. Where's our right-wing art architecture? Why are blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, where's it at? Where's the right-wing art at? When's it gonna come? When's it gonna appear? Because we've talked about it. At what point does it get made? And the problem is, like, yeah, you're right. It's like, like, what do you think of that?
I think that the creative revolution needs to hit the social right.
Oh, we got super chats. Super chats are on. Nice. Hey, thanks, Robert. You're our first super chat. Anyway, sorry. Keep going.
I think that part of what has happened is that the old conservative movement was sort of temperamentally conservative in the preservation of institutions. So you can see this a lot in like George Bush and Mitt Romney style politicians. We have to preserve the institutions, right? Make sure everything is nice and orderly. That sort of attitude is ripe for attack from the counterculture. So we can't have that anymore. We don't want to be seen as preservers of the status quo. What we want to do is own the idea of creating in the right direction. Not diversity for its own sake, not conformity as a form of rebellion, or creativity as a form of rebellion, but creativity in a way of building. I don't want our creativity to be seen as a tool through which to tear down the system. I want us to be able to frame our creativity. See, the left can frame their creativity as bringing the fringe to the center and tearing down the system. The right can't do that. The right needs to frame its creativity as innovative building, innovative creation, so that we can have something. Ascend to what? Yes, we need to figure out what the thing is that we're going for, and then how to ascend and build towards that. Right-wing art has to be geared towards the establishing of aesthetic and establishing of archetypes of beauty and establishing and exuding and being a proponent of something that is good and right. It can't be, like the left is, just a way to tear things down.
So what about, I of course agree. I think that that's a good theory. In practice, who knows? But so in building a practice, what I would ask is, what about the periods of culture in America where we did, forever, whatever momentary reason, bounce a little bit back towards conformity as cool? So the 80s, it's hip to be square. That era, what do you say about that? Was that evidence of somewhere we can go, or was that just like a weird aberration?
I think that the way to go about this is, I think that you touched on something then. Again, your understanding of floating around in the culture as a guy in advertising is serving you very well here. That's exactly it. It's the having the person, like the man in the gray flannel suit became the object of attack, right? The guy who holds things together became the object of attack.
Yeah.
Turning that around and having the man who makes things work and function become a position of status is good. Because we've gotten to the point where the cultural rebel who contributes nothing but sits back, smokes weed, and talks about how society is horrible and maybe makes a little art inside and plays his guitar. Like, that guy's cool, even though he doesn't contribute anything. The guy who actually builds and contributes needs to be able to be seen as somebody who is good. The left has turned that guy into something bad because the guy who builds things gets wealthy, and the wealthy people are the enemy. So what we want to do is we have to gut the resentment, the jealousy, and the bitterness of successful people out of the system. You've got to remove that out, and then create a space for people who are, like the guy who's a line technician who gets the power up during a hurricane. That guy has to be able to have a way of gaining status.
Yeah. Right.
And if you can do that, then it gives your artists something to start building around. They can then say, here's a set of values, because art requires a set of values to go, right? So you have to have a set of values, and then you have to have that hip to be square kind of phenomenon where actually it's high status to make sure that all of the power and the electricity in the city is working. That's actually good. The guy who maintains the power lines is good, right? We want that. So rather than, and part of the way you do that is you have to break one role that artists could do is breaking apart the leftist counterculture narrative and showing how cliched it is. I mean, we've been doing all of these cycles, and you've pointed out all of these cycles, and you've talked about how everyone does these things, and it would really, really, really be nice if someone could break that cycle by hammering that point about the guy who just
Yeah. Here we have a nice comment from Twitter. Thank you. Can't control who's commenting. That's not our fault. What are we supposed to do? Thank you, Jim
I
Jones.
understand that meme is done in all irony, and so I will have a laugh. But point, right? You need to be able to lob. What's happened in the past when the right comes into power is that they just become targets of the counterculture, right? And the counterculture is able to turn them into the man in the gray flannel suit who's counting his money while the poor people starve. We need to be able to, the right needs to be able, the artists on the right need to mark out new territory to give the right a place to inhabit that isn't that caricature.
See, but it's like what I love about what you just said is the critique element is vital, and we're obviously good at that, right? I mean, what is memes? Memes are the art of our time, and we're really good at critical memes that make you laugh really hard at how stupid the, establishment is. We're very, very good at that, and that's a great artistic form. It's been amazing to witness it. I consume it every day. I think what's a little bit strange is I like the notion of building. You hear this with let's bring Art Deco back. Let's get these buildings going. Let's do some really cool stuff with that. I think it's like the question though is, I don't know if it will. I like the idea of this kind of Kulak coolness, like that meme. Remember with it's all the guys with the Oakley sunglasses, and it's like makes your water supply function properly, and it's like all the accounts with guys with Oakleys, and it's like the kind of like MAGA type dudes. I like Kulak cool. I think that would be a really great sort of way in. My friend Sean Monahan is a big trend forecaster. He has this new viral sort of description of where culture is going that's boom boom. Have you seen the boom boom thing? So boom boom is like this aesthetic that's like low light nighttime 80s office with cathode ray tubes and old school boxy kind of cars and that glistening New York 80s kind of Trumpy 80s office vibe,
Yep.
And that's where we're going. And I love that aesthetically. And I think that is kind of inherently right wing. It's inherently American Psycho, Huey Lewis. And I think that that's really cool. And I'm excited to go there. But I don't know if we're going to ever be able to make it cool to be the establishment, right? It's like my fear is that we're going to go to this place where we're trying to force being establishment to be cool. And I don't think that's possible. You can't, it's impossible, right?
I'm just putting something when you said that. Can I send you a message? I'm going to type you a message.
It's in the private. There you go. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. This car is an example of that.
Here, I'll bring it up. Oh yeah, this is exactly. He literally starts the boom boom thing with this car. So this is, he says it all started with this car. So great call. This is exactly. He was the guy who came up with normcore back in the day.
Yeah, and if you look at the inside of this car, the aesthetic is 80s, but the technology is very advanced.
Yeah, it's boom boom. This is perfect boom boom. This is exactly what boom boom is. And right. It's this kind of but it's like hyper technology on the inside. It's great. It's great.
So
everybody's going to be driving these soon.
So this is a mixture.
Love it. I love I didn't even see the hubcaps before. Beautiful, gorgeous.
Yeah,
can't get enough.
And this is a bunch of things all at once. For one, it's techno optimist because it takes on all the new technology. Yeah. So it's techno.
It's the Hyundai Heritage Series Grandeur, just for people who are listening at home and not hearing and not seeing. But anyway, sorry, keep going.
This is a mixture of techno optimism and the aesthetic of like vaporwave. Is a little bit this.
Yep.
So it's a mixture of nostalgia, and what it's attempting to do, I think, is to take what we have now and go back to the past and get stuff that we still like, that we threw away because we thought, oh, that sucks. Now we're looking like, actually, no, that kind of was cool, and we threw it away for no reason. And so I think this is pointing a way forward. This is we can go back to the stuff, back to the past, and get stuff that was actually good. We don't need to throw it all away, but we can do that while dashing into the future. It's innovation, right? It's not just being different. It's not like the lefty fringes where they just go off to the fringe of being weird for weirdness sake, just so they're not in the center. It's moving to the edge, but it's the edge in the sense of innovation. And it maintains itself by calling back to the center of American life, right? The stuff in the 80s and 90s that everyone liked. So this is why when guys say, we can't go back to Fresh Prince, it's like, you kind of have to, because you need to have something you need to have something that holds the gravitational center. And unfortunately for everyone involved, there's no single religion, like Catholics and Protestants. Neither one of those things has neither Catholicism nor Protestantism has sufficient gravitational mass to hold all of the country together. It has to be a step up in the culture that's created that includes both of those people. And that's going to be like 80s Trump aesthetic. Like I see people putting in stuff like this with I did a video once and there was like a filter of like an old VHS, like from the 90s when you put an old VHS on, and someone had Trump dancing, and he's doing like this, and it's like him in the 80s, like with these models on, and he's standing there dancing, like, you know, whatever, and someone has the music is like this kind of odd vaporwave.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But they had it be low enough in the background that you could still hear Trump talking, and he's like pointing at people. And I was just like, that aesthetic, that's not what the critique back to French Prince means. We have a dissident.
Oh, wait, sorry. Okay, hold on. We're reading the comments. Somebody says, that's not what the critique of Back to French Prince means, says Gabe Underground. Okay, what does it mean?
I understand the idea that the critique back to Fresh Prince means you can't just rewind to the 90s, because if you rewind back to the 90s, you just wind up back here again. I understand what that means. Mm-hmm. But what the Back to Fresh Prince meme misses, or that you can't go back to Fresh Prince, is that if you do go back there, and if you do go back to a lot of what we were doing in the 90s, you have the knowledge of what happened now, and you can steer it away, right? The people, part of what the dissident right wants to do, again, and this is where I think the dissident right, in large part, is making the countercultural mistake, because a lot of them think that the culture is a mass brainwashing system, and that you have to break out of the mass brainwashing system, right? You have to escape the matrix. You have to take the red pill. Mm-hmm. Right? So they're making a lot of the same mistakes that the political left has made.
Well, but hold on. I have to ask. Aren't you saying that wasn't a mistake? That's how they conquered for so long, was by playing this loop, right? I mean, aren't you saying that was actually exactly how they managed to stay in head of culture? So why was it a mistake?
Well, I will get there. They kind of managed to save culture, but they also kind of didn't.
And well, they've destroyed everything at the same time. So,
well, they did tear apart the culture, but the capitalism that they wanted to get rid of, they strengthened immensely, didn't they?
Yes, that's true. That's very true. But exactly. But if they strengthened it, isn't that good? Like, don't we want to do that?
Yes, and the strengthening comes from creativity and innovation. Those are both good things.
That's true. Yes.
But the view that society is a massive brainwashing system and we're going to get out of it through cultural rebellion, that helped a lot of these people take government jobs. It helped them, a lot of them, work their way through the culture. It did a lot, and then they hit the penultimate thing in like 2020. They had the government, they had Hollywood, they had the newspapers, they had the largest brainwashing apparatus that has ever been constructed. And then they lost to Trump again. They spent 10 years with the most extensive propaganda outfit that has ever been created, and then lost to Trump. If the theory of cultural brainwashing worked, there would have been an example where it would have worked.
Yeah.
But it didn't. So the idea that you can brainwash the society, that society is a mass culture, is a brainwashing system that you have to rebel against through conform, this is wrong. Bringing in Edward Bernays, who is brought up, and Thomas Frank talks about this in the Conquest of Cool, that Bernays and a lot of this stuff was very influential on the Frankfurt School, and a lot of them bought into that, and it didn't work. That's why the architects keep saying this is now the 7th time we've destroyed it, and it will be the 8th and the 9th, and they'll just keep going in this loop. And all they're doing is they're shredding the social fabric while they go, but they're not any closer to getting out of capitalism. They're not any.
Certainly not. Certainly, they've only strengthened it. They've only completely strengthened. But in a way, they've strengthened their own class, right? In a way, they've done exactly what they didn't think they were doing, but they were actually just destabilizing on their own behalf. Right? I mean, that's basically what they did. And that's why, it's like, you're right that what we need is the pivot to the cool kulak. We need to make it cool to keep your society afloat. And I think that is what's happening, and I think that that's where we're going. But you're never going to be able to do it without it being unique, right? It's like you're never, I mean, I don't know. How did they do it in the 50s? How did they make it so that everybody wanted to be conformist in the 50s? How did they pull that off? War? Yeah, war. You need war.
Yeah, that's how you made it. That's how you made it. Everyone want to be conformist. And the thing is that we don't want to make everyone want to be conformist. That's not the goal. What we want is we want to make the society is replenished through innovation. And so what we want to do is create a way to associate social status with the people who ensure stability while the innovation is going on, right? So in other words, everyone loves the gas pedal, but nobody loves the brake. We have to figure out a way to give the brake some social power.
That's well said. Okay. So who's the brake?
Washroom wheel.
Okay.
I'm going to use the washroom real quick. Who's the brake?
Who's the brake?
The brakes are the people. The brakes are the kind of people who say, you can't go in that direction. That's not allowed.
Yeah. Right.
Are they the people who apply like stigmatizing drag queen story hour? Those people are the brakes. But the problem is those people are conceptualized in our culture as school marms, scolds, and nobody wants to be a killjoy and nobody wants to be a scold, right? That's part of what happened with wokeness is once they got on top, they realized everything was unstable. The only way they could go forward was to somehow create stability, but the only model they had, because again the woke are over feminized, is the school marm, right? Their Dolores Umbridge is all they could come up with. So you need to have somebody who fills that role, but does it in a way where instead of looking like Dolores Umbridge, they instead look like Dumbledore, or they look like the magnificent king who's leading the charge and building something amazing. Elon is kind of doing that with the rockets. Like the rockets are cool, they're innovative, but they happen through a high degree of orderly process and stability, right? But it's cool to see. And so something like that kind of points in a direction-ish. I'm going to use the washroom. I'll be right back.
All right. He's going to use the washroom. I don't like editing, so I'm just going to talk through this. I'll just read some comments, actually, because now we have live comments. So everybody who listens to this later on, you can comment on YouTube. You can actually comment on Twitter, but people have trouble doing that because they don't understand where to do it, because Twitter doesn't do a good job of showing where you're supposed to comment during the actual broadcast. But we get a lot of listen. By far the most live viewers happen on Twitter. So go there and you can comment. We'll read your comments, and you can do it on YouTube as well. We're also now streaming on LinkedIn because we're just huge on LinkedIn, like really important LinkedIn influencers. So let's read some comments. We got Gabe Underground says, manufacturing consent isn't an outdated tool. It was just that the right used the newer model of the tool. I'm not sure if he means when the right use it. Do you mean now that you used it? His other comment is it's only possible when a formation of a counter elite mimetic network, the internet, the control guidance of mimetics is still paramount. So yeah, you're basically saying that the right is just using it's sort of a new counter elite. It's a new counter system to the other system. Anyway, I was just reading comments because I hate editing. So anyway,
I can hear that. To talk about this, there's a little bit of Italian elite theory going on in here, and you can see in this whole thing is still another piece of the what would you call it? The milieu that was coming out of the Frankfurt School was this idea that propaganda can be used to brainwash the masses. Like that's a big thing that they talk about. And they do talk about the ability of mass communications to propagandize people. And I fundamentally, I fundamentally disagree with this. I mean, the right says we took control of this and blah blah blah. No, the only thing that the propaganda outfits are capable of doing is creating what would you call it? Preference falsification for a short period of time. They can flood the zone with enough information to make something look popular, and then everyone falsifies their preferences.
Yes.
But people talk and soon realize that it's actually not popular, and they revolt against it. And at that point, the propaganda is then backed up by force, either soft power, canceling people where it's technically legal but it's not the state, or through hard power in gulags, at which point the propaganda stops shaping people's preferences and starts telling people what they're allowed to prefer in public. And sets the legalized bounds of what discourse is allowed, but it doesn't actually change hearts and minds. If you want to change hearts and minds, and you as a branding guy will know this, you have to hit on something people actually care about.
Yeah.
Right? You need to actually get to the heart of it's got to be real.
Totally. 100%. Yeah, I always say that. I always say it. And my clients are always saying, some clients get that, but then some clients are like, no, I don't care about what I really am. I just want to do what works. I want to do what works. And I'm like, no, that's sin of the spies. It's sin of the 12 spies from the Bible. You probably know. You can't go ahead. You can't see. You got to just trust. You got to trust what's coming from within and what you really are. You got to just trust it. You can't go and try and see, I'm going to start the business that works. Like, I mean, you can, but that never, what are you really doing for the world then? Like, okay, you started something, you started a little widget that works. Like, I don't know, like I feel like I don't want to be a part of that, at least. Like, for the branding that I want to do, I want it to be real. I want it to be coming from truly like the soul of the founder,
I want to do something good and something new and something creative, but which increases and builds society.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we want to do. The left is creating art out of a desire to tear down, which is why so much of their art is negative and deconstructive and ultimately destructive to the social fabric, right? In every leftist movie, all the stuff that brings life, families, marriages, all of this is kind of you could see this in the tropes in the 80s movies where like the guy who has like a dad life his life is boring and stultified, right? Yeah. I want to make dads...
American Beauty. It's American Beauty. They're all secretly gay. They're all Dude,
that's what he mentions in this book. They use American Beauty as the paradigmatic case of the countercultural critique in American life. Like, I didn't know you were an advertising dude, or I would have been like, yes, we could have done this. Like, I would have done this a different way. Could have been like, he knows all this. I could just ask you questions about it and you'd lay it out. That's exactly it. American Beauty is the
perfect 90s. Yeah, like and of course they're 100% of conformist white males are gay. Not a single one is actually just. But here is actually what we're reaching a tension point, and we only have 10 minutes left here. But My fear is in and you are connected to some of these people, so we shouldn't as the right replicate the part of the left that we hate. We shouldn't look at real American Beauty and say, you know what makes me really nauseous is this terrible propaganda BS that's sewed into this thing that is telling everybody they have to be gay. If they're no, conformists are bad. Most beautiful thing in the world is a stupid flying bag. We shouldn't try to reflect that.
Beautiful thing in the world.
Yeah, you don't remember that? We shouldn't try and reflect that. We should not attempt to create right-wing art. That's it's just not going to work. Like we shouldn't be like, oh, we need to fund people who paint pictures of cowboys.
Yeah.
That's not gonna work. It's gonna be just as bad. It's gonna be just as bad as the stuff that they're doing.
We can't, how can I say this? The creation of the right-wing art we want can't be the result of commissions.
I don't know about commissions, but yeah.
I can't commit.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like in the 1500s, you would say, "I will commission you to make to do a painting of the Brunswick family."
Yeah.
It's like and they pay a guy to do it. It's like, okay, well, that is conservative, and it's art, but it's not really going to get us what we want.
It can be the result of a commission. That's fine. It just has to not be critical. It shouldn't be the critical elements that are being commissioned. It should be the positive ones. Like it should be like, we're not going to commission a series about let's make fun of the left.
Yeah.
It should be a series. The thing commissioned should be like a bridge to the moon. It should be like the tallest building ever created by man, or like the most ornate thing. What they're doing now that I really love. Let's bring back woolly mammoths. That's the stuff that should. I mean, maybe you're not into this as a more of a religious guy, but anyway, I
love that idea of bringing back woolly mammoths, but
yeah,
I also think. That if we're just paying people to make pro-conservative art,
yeah,
that's not. They're going to make. What'll happen is that the founders will say, the way that things go now, the people say, I want you to make this, I want you to make this, I want you to make that, and that isn't going to work. What is actually needed is something else. We need to be able to create an ecosystem where artists are given the room to be able to create without having that creation be centered around a politics.
Yeah.
Someone once said that leftists make art and sprinkle it with politics. Leftists make content and sprinkle it with politics. Conservatives do politics and sprinkle it with culture.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's well said.
I think we need to quit doing that. I think what we need to do is allow our conservative artists to make art and then say, whatever comes out of the core of your being, let it come out. And some of it's going to be out there, and some of it's going to be wild, and someone's not going to not get it, and someone's not going to da-da-da-da-da. But it's got to be like the venture. We have to have the right-wing venture capital model of art, where we fund like 10,000 pieces, or like we fund like 500 artists, and if 4 of them hit, it's like great. Like that's how venture capitalists want. They'll fund 100 ventures, and if 5 of them hit, then they make money, right? We need to do that with artists. We need to fund like 100 of them, and if 10 of them hit, or 5.
But hit how? Like, what does hit mean? What do you mean hit?
Say something that stirs people in an authentic way, so that it creates an aesthetic that people start to latch onto.
It's just not. It's not going to work with fine art. It would work if you were again, if you were making something that required a huge amount of effort, then yes, that makes sense. Like if you were trying to create the most beautiful tower, or something that requires insane engineering, or something like that. Like yeah, the thing is that art itself has gotten so twisted and so self-referential and so all these things that navigating your way through that as a new right-wing institution, it's impossible. It's not like you're going to be able to say, hey, I'm going to sponsor this new artist that I think makes good paintings, and then they're going to become the most popular artist, because the quality of the art in the art world doesn't make any difference now at all. There is no good. There's no such thing as a good painter. It doesn't, it's like completely doesn't exist,
It could be, well, one of my friends runs a well-known Silicon Valley tech company, which many people would have probably heard of. It's not one of the big ones like Facebook, but it's
Yeah.
a little bit lower down the scale, but it would be something people would know about. And she said that where the place where you could do it is in design.
Yeah, you could do it in design for sure. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm thinking like taking the creative and innovative and cultural and artistic impulse and funding it. I don't mean like funding painters, although I would like to see that. I actually think you could do it in fine art if you wanted to. But I agree with you that funding innovators and creatives on the right in things like design is a worthwhile endeavor, and let's see if they hit.
Mm-hmm. It's just hit means if you're funding them, they've already hit. That's hitting. They are hitting, and so I don't know. I have like I have a sense in my head of how it would work. Wait, what?
Or see if it succeeds. See if it
succeeds.
See if that design gets escape velocity from its own funding. The way a trend can take off, like I can fund a fashion designer, and if that fashion takes off outside of my funding that particular fashion designer.
Yeah, if it takes off, it's just the astroturf of the regime is so advanced. As you said, it's like you can kind of pretend, you can fake it. You can fake it for a while. If it doesn't actually catch on, it's not going to work. It's just that, like, waiting for the catch-on part is actually, in my opinion, missing the point. What's missing is the people who don't care, who know what's good. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what's missing. What's missing is the people who they don't care if it catches on. Because that's actually not what's going to matter in the long run. That is actually a very right-wing tech way of looking at it. And that's why they have such a hard time with art. Because they don't understand that the people in Hollywood or the people running the art system, at least formerly, before it was taken over by, HR people, they didn't really... They weren't dictated by the market. They were dictated by their opinion, and then they made the market work on their stuff. That's what, I hate. I don't want to like rehab Weinstein because he was a horrible, horrible human being. But the whole idea is, it's not that Weinstein like figured out what the market wanted and then forced his movies into it and then waited for the market to tell him. He believed in his movies. And he made the market. We have to make the market bow to our stuff, not vice versa. We can't make stuff and then wait for the market to tell us if it's good.
Yes.
We have to make the market. We have to make the market.
Yeah. Avoiding of trend chasing.
Yes.
I don't want to engage in trend chasing either. Maybe we'll wrap it up here and I'll toss this out. Do you guys know who Gottfried Leibniz is?
Yes, I'm familiar with Leibniz, the philosopher, right? Leibniz, whatever.
Official job, as I understand it, was to research the Brunswick family history. That was his official job. all of his philosophy and his mathematics, like he invented the notation for calculus, all of his that was all done on the side. His job was funded by researching the Brunswick family history. This is called a patronage.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think my headphones just died here, so we're
No, I hear you.
just in
sorry.
time.
Okay.
I kind of think that we need to be able to develop a sort of, I hate to call it this, but this is what it would be, like a patronage system on the right, so that some of our guys could take risks without having to care of whether or not this succeeds or fails. I'm doing this because I'm doing the art for art's sake, and I'm able to do art for art's sake because I am researching the Brunswick family history. You know? And I think that's a place where they could go. And doing something like that, and then for the people who are funding the artist himself is doing it for art's sake, but the person who's funding the art can think like a venture capitalist and say, hey, this guy I paid him to research the Brunswick family history, and in the process of doing that, look what he made for us. Look at all this tremendous content that's been created. Mm-hmm. Look at all the, TV shows and wonderful cars and new fashion and all of that. So I think that might be like the beginnings of a way forward.
Yeah, no, totally, man. That was I think we're pawing at the edges of a lot of stuff, and it's hard to understand. It's hard to wrap your head around all these things. But I loved everything you said, and I think you're completely right about the cycle of rebellion or the cycle of anti-conformity, and just how trapped in that we are, and how much it's time to get out of that intentionally. And we need, maybe we need our own Frankfurt School that's saying, hey, how do we scramble out of this? What's the new, how do we not make it so that we're just manipulating people to think they're bursting out all the time? How do we, I think you got it. It's, how do we have a plan? Let's make a plan for how do we, for the next 100 years, make it cool, or not, even if it's not cool, make it desirable to follow the rules a little bit, or maybe not even follow the rules, but at least not get your dick chopped off. What? Wait, what?
Build up rather than tear down.
Yeah, to build up. Right, exactly. How do we make it good to build up? There you go. Okay, dude, thank you so much. Where do I send people? Are you mainly your Twitter account?
Yeah. At Wokal_distance is my handle on X.
Great.
That's my big social media platform. I don't really use anything else but that.
Cool.
I'm a creature of X.
Yeah, you are a creature of X. I like that. All right, man. See you later.
Thank you.